Right.
Okay,
Okay.
there we go. So I wanted to thanks for me, right, for this call. I wanted to talk a little bit. So your book, the Mormon Thunder book that you gave me,
Yeah. Yeah.
can you talk a little bit just about like how you started writing? I think you had mentioned to me
Yeah.
that the LDS leaders had you, like they wanted you to write on Heber J. Grant, right?
That's correct. Yeah, what the deal was, Case and I had been hired at the church history department right after I got my PhD back in 1974 to do another project with some soft money they had. When I finished that project, or several parts of it, I kept working on over the years. Published a couple of books out of that. Then the first presidency wanted an official new biography of Heber J. Grant. I got the assignment, and I got started on it. And I think I've told you all this before. I'll make it brief. And found you always start a biography by who were the parents and where's he come from, and kind of got bogged down in Jedediah, his father, and went to Dr. Arrington and said, "Can I do that first?" And he said, "Sure, go ahead." So that's how I got onto the Jedediah Grant project. And after I'd been working on it for a little while, I got hired at Weber. Long story, one I won't bore you with, and kept on working on it, and finally got it done and accepted by the University of Illinois Press in 1982. And then they had it in print and hardback for 12 years, 13 years. Did quite well for a scholarly, university press book. And then they contacted me and said, "We've decided not to put it into paperback. You can have the copyright." So I took the copyright back from them. And shortly thereafter, Greg Colford contacted me, and he's the one that published the one you showed on the screen a minute ago,
Right.
and asked me if I had the copyright. I said I did, and he said, "Would you be willing to do another edition?" And I said, "Yes." "How much do you want it changed?" He said, "Not that much. I'd like you to go in and work with a copy editor and bring up to date some recent scholarship in the footnotes, modify it however you want, and the paperback edition, and it's still in print." That's the whole story over, good grief, what are we talking about now, 50 years? 60 years?
Yeah.
1975, I think I started on it. So that's a long time ago. Anyway, that book doesn't sell a lot. I think the paperback, they publish them on demand now, as you probably know, these presses like Greg Colford. So they don't have a big warehouse full of them, and they're backlogged and what have you. I think the last report I got from them, they had sold in 2025, I think they sold 7 or 8 of them, something like that.
Okay.
And you can find it in bookstores, but it never did get into Deseret Book for some reason, even though it started off as a church-sanctioned project. I don't know if they were leery about University of Illinois Press, which had done a lot of LDS publishing, and maybe they didn't like some of it. I don't know. Although you can find the Illinois Press stuff at Deseret Book. It never did make it Deseret. I never pushed it at Deseret. And maybe the Colford edition got into Deseret. I don't know. I've never looked to see. Because Greg he's a very faithful guy. He does essentially apologetic Mormon history. I've never seen him publish anything that was even on the edge of being controversial about Mormon history. Pretty faithful guy.
He's not going to do an edition of Fawn Brody's book?
Huh?
He's not going to do another edition of Fawn Brody's book?
No, he's not going to do that. Yeah, he's not that type of a publisher.
Yeah.
He's got quite an operation. He's down in Sandy, and he publishes, you can look him up on the internet, but I think he publishes 10 or 12 books a year. And most of them are, I wouldn't call them Deseret book type histories, but most of them are pretty positive to the church and positive to LDS history. Nothing controversial.
I'm looking him up right now. So he publishes LDS books. Does he have like a history background, or is he a business guy?
I don't know what Greg's background is in terms of his education. I've talked with him on the phone only. I've never actually talked to him face to face and dealt with his minions over the years. But I do pay attention to what he publishes, and it's mostly, I would say, all positive stuff. He's published histories of various missions. Like one comes to mind, he published history of the church in Argentina. You can look in the back of that book you've got in your hand, and there's a pretty good bunch of advertising for several of these books. You can see kind of some of the other stuff he was doing when that came out.
Yeah, I see. Trek East, Mormonism meets Japan.
Yeah, stuff like that. He did that one by the two guys at the University of Idaho State about the DNA and the Indians, and who are the children of Lehi. Very positive.
Oh, interesting.
How you could get around the lack of DNA evidence for the Book of Mormon.
So before you were at Weber, you were with the church history department, and you worked with Leonard Arrington at that time. Was that where you met Quinn, or did you meet Quinn somewhere else?
Yeah, that's where I met Mike. Mike was he'd been at the church historical department under Arrington, and he went back to Yale to get his PhD. And right at the time I was leaving to take the job at Weber, Mike had finished his PhD and he had come back, and so we worked together for some time, maybe 6 months, 7 or 8 months. I actually went on a couple of trips together with our families before he had come out. He had a wife and 4 kids, and just a nice little family. Then he came out, and the marriage, of course, dissolved, and Mike went on to be Mike. To his dying day, bore his testimony. He was a believer. Interesting guy. But yeah, that's where I met Mike, and we became very good friends.
Did you keep in contact with very often after the September?
We'd probably meet for lunch every time he was in Salt Lake. He'd call me, and he lived in Mexico for a while, and he lived in the Los Angeles basin, a couple of different places for a while. Never did live back in Utah after he left BYU. University of Utah had a chance to hire him, didn't do it, which was stupid. Then
you know why the U of U didn't want to hire him?
Yeah, it's a funny story. Dean May died, who was their great Utah historian, and Dean he'd been a bishop, a Latter-day Saint guy, and when they went to replace Dean to do their Utah history program, Mike was the prime candidate, and the anti-Mormons didn't want him because he was a Mormon. The Mormon people didn't want him because he was excommunicated. So he got hammered by it from both ends. And they didn't hire him. It was a terrible mistake. And it's laughable. In fact, at the time, we were all laughing at the University of Utah for the dilemma they got themselves into because he got hammered by both sides. The antagonistic to the Mormon side and the pro-Mormon side both hammered him. He couldn't win.
So he was kind of in this weird no man's land where he couldn't either at that point. Was that like?
So the Mormons didn't like him because he'd been exed, and the non-Mormons didn't like him because he was a believer or he'd been at BYU. And then after that, as I say, he went off and had patrons who helped him do his work, and he published 4 or 5 books after that. And he was working. When the last time I saw him, I had lunch with him just before he died, maybe 3 months before he died, at the Nauvoo Cafe down in the Joseph Smith building. He was working on a book about post-1904 polygamy in the church. And I don't think he ever finished that. If he did it, it never saw the light of day. I've never seen anything come out of it. But we met and talked about that. And Mike was a fascinating guy in so many ways. He was a real, true believer. It was probably among all the people I've known in professional Mormon history circles, Mike probably had the deepest, most profound belief of any of them I ever knew. And yet he was out. He was excommunicated and out.
Do you think that that's...
He got on Ed K. Packer's list, and that was the end of him.
Sorry, say that one more time. You said that Packer
was on Ed K. Packer's S list, fill in the blank, and he was done after that. Elder Packer really didn't care for Mike. They had quite a debate over faithful history versus faith-promoting history. And Mike was you're going to write faithful history, I'm not writing faith-promoting history. And Elder Packer, of course, said, look, if you're writing history and you're a Latter-day Saint, it should be faith-promoting. and that got them into quite a squabble. It made Time magazine, actually an article in Time magazine about it back when it was going on. And in fact, when we ate at the Nauvoo Cafe that last time, and I wish I had a date to give you on that, Elder Packer had just died. And I asked Mike how he felt, and he said, I have very mixed feelings, and a tear rolled down his cheek. So they'd had quite a long, contentious relationship, and it bothered Mike a lot. It bothered him a lot that he was not a Latter-day Saint officially. It bothered him a lot. In fact, he told me one time with a great emotion, he said, every time I go to the church library and have to sign in as a non-member, he said, it just breaks my heart. So, somebody they should have left alone, in my view. You know, there's a lot of gay people in the church, but he was outspoken about it. Got him in trouble.
You know, if he ever, like, after that communication, if him and Boyd Packer ever, like, talked later on?
Yeah, I know they did. I know they talked a lot. They talked both before and after they were in contact. It was not contentious, but not friendly either, from what I could understand. I wish Mike was around to talk about that with you. He would, but I never pressed too hard about it. I mean, Elder Packer was my mission president, so I had some insights into his personality, but we never talked much about it.
Yeah, you were telling me a little bit about that in the summer, about like him pushing to get a haircut when you first came in.
Yeah, my very first
just
thing.
Gotten it.
Yeah. I thought my hair was shorter than ever been in my life. It was pretty short, and he took one look at me and said, get a haircut. First thing he said to me as a new missionary in his mission, Brother Sessions, you need a haircut. I said, okay, sir, I'll go get a haircut. Next day I did.
Do you think there were other members of the 12 that really wanted Quinn out, or do you think that was primarily Packer? And
I was primarily Elder Packer. There were other people in the 12 who certainly didn't have much patience for folks like Mike, and there were the Lavina Fielding Anderson, and there were the what I call them the February 6th or something. They excommunicated 6 people all at once, and they were all excommunicated for their publications and their scholarly stuff.
Like the Tanos, right? And
names of some of the others, but they were called the 6th.
September 6th. September 6th.
Yeah. And they should have left them all alone. Lavina was a sad case. In fact, she edited the paperback copy you've got in your hand there. She was the editor that Greg hired. Knew Lavina really well. She sent her son on a mission, had one child. Paul Anderson has hymns in the hymn book that he wrote. Lavina sat on the back row at church the rest of her life, and they would not let her back in the church to her dying day. Tragic. Somebody had a real bone in the craw over those 6 people. Most of them became bitter and antagonistic, but Mike never did, and Lavina never did. There was some woman named Allred. She became quite antagonistic, and there was a couple had an Italian surname, but I can't think of it at the moment. They became quite bitter and anti-Mormon of the 6.
I feel like I've heard on podcasts and on different areas, what's the name of that? It was a couple that wrote a lot of like history books that were not very like positive toward the church.
Gerald and Sandra Tanner.
Yeah, did you ever meet the Tanners?
Oh yeah, I knew them both. I think both of them would have recognized me and said, "Oh yeah, that's Gene Sessions." Maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, I met them both. They were both descendants of Brigham Young. Mm-hmm. They were both very nasty, with smiles on their faces, anti-Mormons. They did some good things. They found a lot of material in their search for dirt. They found a lot of stuff nobody else found, and it was good stuff. They put out a monthly newsletter called the Lighthouse Ministries or something, and they found a lot of good stuff. They were digging deep and looking for dirt, and a lot of stuff they found was important stuff. And of course, the Joseph Smith Papers has now dug even deeper and found what they found and even more. They both died sort of triumphantly bitter. Gerald went first, and then Sandra became. She was kind of demented toward the end and kind of laughable toward the end. But
I thought Sandra
interesting.
died.
Interesting. They made their living attacking the church.
Did Sandra Tanner die? I knew that Gerald had, but
if she didn't, she's very demented and gone. Is she still alive?
I'm looking it up. No.
Last I knew, she was very Alzheimer's or demented and not with it anymore. I know Gerald died some time ago.
Yeah, I know Gerald. But I want to say it was on some podcast that it might have been Mormon Stories where I think they brought Sandra Tanner on, and she talked about how Mike Quinn wrote something against what she had written, and he used like a pseudonym, but they were able to link it to him based on like his patient or something similar to that.
Yeah, he right after he got back from Yale, Gerald and Sandra had published quite a lengthy tome, the stuff they had dug up, anti-church stuff. And Mike wrote a response posted by Deseret Book as an anonymous that everybody knew was Mike.
Yeah.
It was on assignment from Elder Arrington, Brother Arrington, but we all knew he had written it. Pat him on the back and congratulated him for it. I don't know how involved the brethren were in that or whether that was just Dr. Arrington put him up to that, but yeah, he wrote that.
Okay. Yes, I'm
just absolutely destroyed what they had written, page by page, line on line, destroyed it.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Quinn, he knew a lot.
He was quite a believer.
Like when he died, like a lot of knowledge was going to be like lost.
Oh yeah.
So I'm looking this up. It shows. I think Gerald died in 2006. I think Sandra's still alive.
Okay. She's still alive. She's gone. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I've not seen anything published by her or any noise from her in 4 or 5 years. I kind of thought she'd passed on.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Maybe.
I don't think she's publishing.
She's got to be very old.
Do you know what year that was that
That would have been, I can give you I'm not precise, but it was when I was leaving and Mike had just returned, so it was 75 probably when that happened, when he wrote that response to the Tanners.
So it was,
I had a copy of that somewhere, but I'm looking at my big shelf full of that kind of stuff and I don't see it. But I can't remember the name of it, but everybody knew Mike had written it.
Yeah.
It was just ingenious. Well done. Absolutely well done. You can probably discover all that online digging around.
Yeah. I want to find that. Do you know around what time it was when the University of Utah was looking at potentially hiring Mike?
Yeah, it was right after Dean May died, and that was you can look that up. Dean May died in 20. Look up Dean May, University of Utah, and when he passed, he had a heart attack at
2004.
It was right after that they had a chance to hire Mike and didn't do it. They had to hire one of their own PhD graduates, Paul Reeve.
Oh yeah,
Paul's a great guy, but they were very reluctant. But they couldn't find anybody else who was qualified to take over for Dean, for one of their own grads.
Yeah, he's
Paul's great. He's done a great job there. I love Paul.
Yeah, I worked with his son years ago, like as a ref, and I met him once through that and had maybe one. But yeah, he seemed good. He seemed knowledgeable.
Lives in Bountiful.
Yeah. When you compared universities' history programs, I'm convinced that Weber was really unique in the sense that you have small class sizes and that probably more free thought than BYU in the sense of like I remember reading Age of Reason by Thomas Paine in one of my classes with I think Deacon, and I did like a directed readings course with you where I read Quinn's books and I read No Man Knows My History and Bushman's Joseph Smith biography. So I felt like I was able to dive into stuff that maybe some BYU students they wouldn't have that chance to take a directed readings course like that. I picture the University of Utah being a lot of like graduate students are teaching some of the courses. So I feel like Weber was good and unique in that way. Do you have any thoughts or insight?
Yeah, we do. We were, Kason, and unfortunately, what I'm going to tell you is not happy. When I left 5 years ago, and Catherine McKay left at the same time, although I don't think she was that well qualified to teach Utah, they had a chance to hire, his name slipped my mind, Peterson. Come on, first name. Anyway, he taught for years at Layton High, had gotten his PhD, and had been teaching part-time for us. And really a good Utah scholar. And I thought he had a lock on the job. Instead, they hired a woman from the University of Colorado who had absolutely no background in Utah history whatsoever. And as far as I know, the only Utah history that's being taught there now is being taught in the summer online by Dr. McKay. So we've lost our inside track. We used to have Utah history every single semester. Either I taught it, Richard Satter taught it, and then summer McKay would teach it online. We were very strong in Utah history. It's not true anymore. And you know, and a matter of fact, only the University of Utah State's got that Mormon Studies Institute that's pretty strong, and they do some good things there. But of the three big schools, you know, BYU, Utah, and Utah State, this will surprise you. The weakest at Utah history is BYU.
Really?
Weakest, at least that's the song. At least at the U, they've got Paul, who's a great Utah historian. He's made himself even more qualified after he's been there now, 20 years or however long he's been there since Dean died. Paul's he's just cranking out good stuff, and he's right on top of things. BYU, it's just hit and miss here and there. They're so divvied up between church history and doctrine and the history department. They're fuzzy lines there. The great Utah history is being done now is the Joseph Smith Papers Project. It's fantastic. And you think Joseph Smith is pre-Utah. They're finding so much material that fits into the whole scheme of Utah history and Mormon history. I'm really impressed with what they're doing at the Papers Project. Really impressed. I'm going to a meeting, in fact, next Wednesday night. The Sons of the Utah Pioneers in Huntsville has got Matthew Groh coming, who's the director of the Joseph Smith Papers Project. I can't wait to listen to Matt talk about what they found lately. Some really sharp people there. Groh's the guy. Somebody asked him, I saw this interview, somebody asked him, don't you know too much to believe in Mormonism? And he said, if you think you know too much to believe in it, it proves you don't know enough. Isn't that a great quote? Matthew Groh said that. If you think you know too much to believe in Mormonism, it proves you don't know enough. Very cool.
So we talked about Utah history with the different universities. What about just history departments in general, like U.S. history or world history? Do you think that one school is stronger overall? One school is going to have better teaching.
The problem we have at Weber, and you're right about the small classes and the advantages you enjoyed, but the problem we have at Weber is that we had 13 full-time positions. They cut us to 11 with this last round of cuts. So we have 11 historians, and the department has made the decision that they have to have these boxes, these silos, like there has to be a Russian historian, there has to be a Latin American historian, there has to be, these silos that we've had for 50 years. And so we've, in the hiring that they've done recently, there's not a universal kind of sense of we've got these people who really know vast, what's the word I'm looking for, side by side, we can cover the whole ground like we used to when we were more of a generalist department. We had to cater to everybody. Like I taught Africa, I taught U.S., I taught Utah, I taught women's history. Now that everybody's got their little specialty. And silly when you only got 11 people. I would think right now if let's say you came to me and you're 22 years old and or 21 years old and you're looking for a really strong history department to get your degree in Utah history, I'd send you to the U. And if it was general history, I'd probably send you to the U, because they've got a lot of money and they've got lots of people teaching in the history department. BYU does too, but I'm just not as impressed with what they've got there. I went to a talk, one of their Native American historian, woman named Pulsifer, and I had to bite my cheek all the way through it because she didn't know from straight up. Half of what she said was just not true, and it was so pandering to the Shoshone, and she didn't know anything about what she was talking about, and I don't think BYU can compete. It's just my gut feeling. I'd probably send you to the U. Now, for lower division, I'd send you to Weaver by far, because it's a small class. I'd send you to Weaver for lower division by far.
For lower.
Small. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So undergrad, like, so if someone was gonna, right, someone's in Utah and they wanted to go on to maybe do a PhD, you would recommend maybe undergrad Weaver, master's program, University of Utah, and then look at.
Yep, that's what I'd recommend. Yep.
And
I sent my own son wanted a master's. I sent him to Oxford.
Okay. I mean, I feel like I had these conversations with you, and even when I did talk with Paul Reeve, I think that I asked him about this. I think I had asked Mike Quinn, and I feel like the consensus I got from everyone was like, hey, think twice about doing a PhD in history. And that's part of why I did a PhD more focused on history education, because there's a lot more jobs in education or for PhD historians right now.
Right. You're smart.
Yeah,
Where are you? You're done, aren't you? Are you pretty close to being done?
Yeah, so my committee approved my dissertation, and I had to send it into a professional reviewer, and so they then went through that, and then they sent it to the university, one of the, like, I think provost, one of the graduate school people, and they're reviewing it, and I'm hoping to hear back soon. But I'm supposed to walk in a few weeks, but there's a chance that they'll make me do some extra things in the summer, depending on what they say about the dissertation. I'm hoping I'm done.
You can still walk, even if there's a few little things left to do, and maybe you want to do that because it's great.
Yeah.
You can still walk. If they said, look, we got you to do this and 2 or 3 little things, then just do it in the summer, but walk.
Yeah, I think that's
what
I'm excited to.
Congratulations, my boy. That's great news.
Thanks. Yeah, and then next year I've been offered an admin internship position to be like an intern assistant principal, and so.
Dynamite.
What was that?
Great. I just said dynamite. That's great. Where are you going to be?
So the way they do it in my school district is they have all of the people they selected for admin internships. I think there's like 13 of us, and we're going to sit down in a room, and there's going to be principals, and it's going to be like rotating, where principals interview us, and then they decide.
Cool.
They decide who they want the most, and I think they submit a form, kind of ranking who they want most, and then the district places us based on that.
Wow. Hey, remind me, I'm embarrassed. What district are you in?
I'm in Granite School District.
Granite, that's right.
Yeah.
I was going to say Jordan, but you're right, Granite. Yep.
Yeah, Granite. Yeah, that's the one. I feel like I heard a Quinn story, or I read a Quinn story about something where he was almost picked up at Arizona State University, and there was some really big donor that pushed back aggressively. Did you ever hear about that?
Yeah, I did hear about that, Kaysen, but I'm vague on it. It's way in the back of my mind. I know after he didn't get hired at the U, that mess, I think there were 2 or 3 other schools that kind of put their line in the water for him, and for whatever reason it didn't work out. He didn't like the deal, or didn't, whatever, I don't know, but it's vague in the back of my mind that you're correct, that there were other schools that expressed interest in him. I think by that time, Mike, at least from what I could sense just in casual conversations with him, he had these patrons lined up who were willing to support him, and he was really, he loved to teach. When he was at BYU, he was voted like unanimously the outstanding professor at BYU. So he was a great teacher, but I think his real love was research and writing, and he didn't enjoy that much the distraction of teaching. For him, it would have been a bit of a distraction. So I think they would have had to make a pretty good offer, like an endowed chair, which at the U he would have had that kind of support if he would have taken Dean's place. Yeah, I did hear something about that. It's very vague. You may have heard more than I did. It's vague.
Yeah, it was mainly it was an article that I had read that it was some big donor that had a construction company that
it's ringing a bell.
That was LD. He like pushed back pretty aggressively on the university and indicated that he wasn't going to donate if they
hired him.
Yeah, and it was something that, like, I was pretty bothered by it. It was like a pretty disparaging. Like
that's like vague in my mind. I can almost remember the company. It was at it's all vague in my mind. You probably know more than I do. Very sad.
Yeah, but from what you're describing, so he had patrons, people that were funding his work and his research.
Yeah.
Like, bills.
And giving places to live. I mean, he lived in Rancho Cucamonga and the LA Basin for 4 or 5 years, and somebody just gave him a house to live in. And I don't know if these were other gay people who were, in close friendship with him, or however you want to term it, or if it was just patrons on the historical side, I don't know. Because he was always very close-minded about that. Like I'd say, "Where are you living now, Mike?" And he'd say, "Oh, I'm in Mexico," or he never talked about who was supporting him or what was going on there.
I didn't know he lived in Mexico.
He lived in Mexico for a while. His father was Mexican. I'm trying to remember how it all came out. I mean, he's half Hispanic. He does speak Spanish fluently. Did speak Spanish fluently. I think it was his father was Hispanic, and the name Quinn came about from being adopted with his mother or something. I don't know. But his father was Mexican. He was a Mexican. Don't quote me on that. He spoke fluent Spanish. I know that. I don't know where he went on his mission. I don't know. He was a return missionary. I don't know where he went.
I met up with him twice, and one of the things that he told me, like, a little bit about his childhood background, but he claims that if it hadn't been for the New Deal, his family would have starved. I think he was in California at that time growing up.
Yeah, I heard that story.
Yeah, so I think he was pretty pro FDR and New Deal.
Yeah.
I remember at Weber you had mentioned this was probably before the 2016 election, and you were just talking about political views of professors. I think you had said I'm the only person in the department that voted Romney. What do you think it is?
That's true.
Yeah, what do you think it is? Historians and
I don't know.
Study of
history
history.
Tend to be quite progressive and quite anti-Republican. I'm not a Republican by any means, but I'm not a progressive. I think there's too much wrong with the Marxist leanings of it all. It's gotten more Marxist as time's passed too, and so when you were around back in those days before both of us left, I was probably by far the most non-progressive in the department. I wouldn't call myself a conservative, but the most probably the most right on the spectrum, further right than anybody else. Yeah, you don't go to department meetings. It was like if you had a disagreement with the progressive angle, you just kept your mouth shut because it was assumed that everybody was a Saul Alinsky Marxist.
When you say
Sarah Dant would say right out that she was a communist.
Really?
Right out. Yeah. Heard her say it numerous times.
When you say that it became more Marxist, you're talking about the Democratic Party, the activists?
Yeah, the progressives, the whole left wing of political thought. Yeah, the Democratic Party, what you see now, I mean, it's all very Marxist in its outlook. Wealth redistribution, you listen to these guys. I mean, I think you got Bernie Sanders types and the AOC types and all that on the very fringe, but the base of the Democratic Party right now is very, very Marxist in its outlook. There's no question about it. I mean, you listen to what they say, and it's very Marxist. And I've spent my professional career seeing too much wrong with Marxism to be a Marxist.
Yeah.
And they always say, well, it was never done right. Well, maybe not. It was never done right. Can it be done right? I don't know if it can.
Yeah, I wouldn't put myself in.
No, I can't go there. Yeah, I think I was by far the most right wing of the department.
Do you think like like FDR New Deal type stuff, is that something that makes you, or
I was the only person in the department, ironically, after I say that, who ever wrote a book about the New Deal, and that was my book on the foreign debt crisis in the 1930s. And I'm not. My dad was a sheep man and did not graduate from high school, but he was very anti-FDR, called him all kind of curse words and names. And my mother was a New Deal Democrat, poor farm family, New Deal all the way. So I grew up listening to them fight and call FDR. My dad called him names, and my mother would get mad and defend him. And I've got a pretty balanced view of FDR, I think.
Yeah.
Great president, no question. Top 5, no question.
I have to question if, like, when you talk about more people that are on board with like larger wealth redistribution, taxes.
Yeah.
Is AI is increasing, if more people are losing jobs, and if you have a smaller group of people that own the AI getting wealthier, I think that those sentiments are only going to grow over time.
I think you're right.
The people who at one point maybe had better jobs and assets and home ownership, is those groups of people, if that becomes, I don't know, a narrower group of people, you'll probably see a shift.
Yeah,
but
I think you're very, very right, my friend. You know, the Democrats are, I'm not a Trumper, so don't take it that way, but I think the Democrats, in addition to just hating Trump, they're trying to find their footing somewhere else in this, this affordability word. They've managed to get even the Republicans to buy into this notion that everything is about affordability. And when I look at economic indicators, things are more affordable now than they ever have been in the history of the United States for more people. But you say that to a progressive type person and they're going to laugh you to scorn. But I don't know. I do think Marxism, the basic tenet of it, is very appealing to the progressive folks, becoming even more so. And in academia, it's rampant. I mean, like you said, there was nobody in this department who was not. Even the other Mormons, like, McKay was a Jack Mormon, but you had, and she was very left-wing, but you had Stephen Francis, you had, who's still active in the church, you had...
I didn't know that about Francis. That was the first
he's active in the church. In fact, he was the only single person in the South Weber stake to be on the High Council for a while. And my brother lived in that stake, and he just said everybody loved him when he came because he was such a great speaker, very faithful. And then you had Eric Swedane, who always maintained to me that he was a believer, but I don't know how involved in the church he was. Nathan Reeves is an apostate. He left church when he was a teenager. Was raised in the church, but left when he was a teenager. The rest of them are all from out of state, Gentiles. But even the Mormon ones are pretty left wing.
Richie told me he was a Utah County guy and did a mission.
He went on a mission. Richie did. Yeah, Jeff went on a mission to Mexico or to Argentina.
Yeah.
But he dropped out a long time after. Yeah. Married a woman from Massachusetts or someplace, and we had a couple of long talks, Jeff and I, about his feelings about the church, and it was all positive. He was not a bitter type guy. Some of the ex-Mormon types they get bitter and nasty and antagonistic. Jeff was not like that at all.
Sometimes
he did tell Sarah, or he told Susan Matt that the main reason he took this job at a prep school back east is he had to get out of Utah. He never talked to me like that about Utah because he was raised in Salem, for heaven's sakes. Went to BYU and all that. His dad, he introduced me to his dad a couple of times, come up for things, and his dad was quite a typical LDS-looking dude. But his mother was from Mexico.
Yeah.
He's a good guy, Jeff. I loved Jeff. I really did. I thought he was just great.
Yeah, I liked him pretty well. I think out of all the professors I took the most classes, I think, from you, and then from Jeff Ritchie. I took one from Susan Matt, one from Brower, I think one Reeves. I definitely had the most with you and Ritchie at that time.
Yeah. Brady's got a grandparent or two who were Latter-day Saints way back in his back. Yeah, but his parents are not. He was not, his Mormon connection is way back.
I remember one thing I wanted to ask you about. So, right, with the war going on with the United States is in right now with Israel and Iran, I'm seeing with a lot of people my age, a lot of maybe annoyance or anger toward Israel, feelings that Israel drove us into the war. Did you see a lot of agitation with Israel as you were growing up? Like, did you ever hear of like the USS Liberty, for example, or?
No, I never. My personal experience was always, away from my academic experience, was always that it was just automatic that we were going to be pro-Israel because of the Jews, and we were supportive of them, and we had set Israel up after the war, and et cetera, so forth and so on. And I've been, honestly, as an old man, just looking on from the sidelines, quite shocked at the hatred for Israel that's out there. My son was in law school at UCLA, and during the Palestinian riots, and he said it was just unbelievable how much hatred there was for Jews. He parked at the Institute, which was right next door to the Jewish Center, and the Jewish Center had to hire armed guards at the Jewish Center to keep it from being vandalized. And it just kind of astounded me because when I grew up, I don't know when you grew up, you're a lot younger than I am, but when I grew up, it was just sort of, we're buddies with the Jews. I guess that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
My son's law school graduation, 1/3 of 600 JDs getting their JDs were wearing Palestinian shawls. 1/3 at the graduation.
This was
at UCLA. My son's graduation for his Juris Doctor degree at UCLA, 1/3 of the grads were wearing Palestinian shawls.
Was this 5?
Yeah, that was just 2 years ago. It was last year. It was last spring. Yeah. 1/3. 200 kids with Palestinian shawls on their shoulders.
And
he had one of his best friends in the law school who graduated with him that became very close friends with Jewish, and she was pepper sprayed twice, threatened often. So there's a lot of anti-Semitism out there. You can call it what you want, but it's just plain anti-Semitism. I don't understand it myself. I can't understand it.
It's kind of wild. It's like there's a separation of Israel and Jewish people, and sometimes people merge together. But it's with social media, there's a lot of videos that are being shared that show people in Gaza that were getting bombed and getting leveled. So people see that, and then you would also have like some universities like Columbia, you'd have protests that were organized against Israel, and sometimes students would get in trouble and they get suspended. Like bad things happen to them. So then it becomes a question of like, okay, like is it like freedom of speech? Are we allowed to talk about it? But also, there is a lot of mixed in just straight anti-Jewish feelings, and it's
UCLA was apparently the worst after Columbia got it rolling, and apparently when it got to the late stages of the pro-Palestinian. UCLA was worst of all the universities. I've read several articles that indicate that, and my son was right in the middle of that. There were places you couldn't go on campus. You got to get to class. You had to go way around to get to class because of the camps and the tents and the destruction. I think when my son told me that when the whole thing was over, it was like $3 million worth of damage to the campus by the
$3 million.
Yeah, $3 million of damage to the campus by the pro-Palestinian campers and anti-Semitic people. I don't understand it. I'll be honest with you. I'm at a loss as an academic, supposed academic, to understand it. I understand the history of Israel. I understand the mistakes that were made, and there were many. But I don't understand to me, it's base ignorance for people to say Israel is like South Africa, it's an apartheid state. When you got 2 million Israeli Arabs who have full citizenship, vote, there are Israeli Arabs in the Knesset. You can't call that an apartheid state like South Africa, but they do it anyway. I mean, they don't want to even, the facts, the statistics that deny the fact, and it's all emotion. I think it's grounded in deep anti-Semitism. It's just rampant. You see it everywhere.
There's a lot of I think division within the U.S. on where people get their news, right? And so you have some probably more mainstream news outlets, and some people accuse those of, I don't know, being overly sympathetic to Israel. Some might disagree, but have independent podcasters, a lot of whom are a lot more critical. The whole like apartheid state claim, I think some of that comes from as well, like you've heard of like the West Bank. Sometimes you have these Israeli settlers that are taking people's homes, and then Israel almost looks the other way. But it's definitely messy, and
there's a lot of troubling stuff like that. I mean, I'm close friends with Elder Marlon Jensen, and he's very progressive and very much a Democrat and all these thinking. And I was surprised at a meeting I was in with him, a book club meeting with him, when he went off on Israel and insisted on calling it the occupation of Palestine. And I don't see it that way. I mean, the whole history of the world is occupation of somebody else's land. Let's face it. I mean, this whole thing, well, the Shoshones are it's their land. We stole it from them. Well, they stole it from the Fremont.
You say the Shoshone stole it from the Fremont?
Yeah, they stole it from the Fremont. Yeah, when the Fremont were weakened by drought and whatever else, around 1300, the Shoshone rolled in here and took it away from them. So it's the whole history of the world.
Well, that wouldn't like hearing that narrative.
Yeah. I was walking across campus a couple of years ago. After I retired, I was walking across, and some bunch of students had put up all these signs that said, "This is Shoshone land, this is Paiute land, and this is all these different tribes." And I thought, I wish I was still teaching, because I'd say, look, if a Paiute was standing right here, he'd either be dead or in slavery in 20 minutes. Because a Shoshone would grab him and kill him or put him into slavery in 20 minutes. This is Shoshone land, but they took it from the Fremont. And we don't know how the Fremont took it from the Archaics, but they did. It's just the whole history of the world is people taking land away from somebody else. It's just the way it is.
I agree. Right. That's how the history is. I think some people probably they have hope, like, oh, we can evolve past that. I don't know that people ever will, but yeah, that is a good point you bring up often with Native Americans, right? That there's this narrative that the Europeans came and brutalized them, which is true, but also they were often brutal to each other, and we're not.
They were brutalizing each other. You want to hear the worst brutalizing, and I got into this by accident. I was reading a history, in fact, by a Ute Indian for here, the guy that became a scholar. Get his name off the top of my head, but he was with good sources recounting what the Apache did to the Pima when they first came into Arizona around 1500, 1550 AD. They just massacred, brutalized them, enslaved them, took the men, cut the soles off their feet, cut their eyelids off, and sent them out into the desert to die, enslaved their women and children. That's long before any Indian had ever seen a white man. So don't give me this, oh, they were nice people and we ruined them. And, I mean,
yeah, probably the tribe.
It doesn't excuse it, but I don't take all this one-sided, it was an eco-paradise until a white man came. That's nonsense. Ever been to a buffalo jump where they drove whole herds of buffalo off cliffs so they could eat 2 or 3 of them?
That's what the native tribes do?
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, that's pretty well. The Apache.
Well, congratulations on your PhD, buddy. I'm really proud of you. Next time I talk to you, I'll have to be Doc.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. The Apache wasn't that the group that like Dominguez and Escalante like had to take that other route to avoid because like the Apache?
Yeah, well, yeah, they wanted to avoid the Apache and the Yaquis, closely related Yaquis. But the main thing Dominguez and Escalante were trying to do is avoid the Grand Canyon while they went north out of Santa Fe instead of trying to find a way across Salt River or somewhere like that to get to California. Yeah, they didn't want to mess with the Comanche or the Apache or the Yaquis. Nobody did.
That makes sense.
I mean, look at poor Jed Smith. What a nice guy. Everybody loved Jedediah Smith, and Comanches killed him for trying to get a drink of water out of a creek. Jedediah Smith.
Is that the one that was attacked by the bear?
No, that's a different story. That's the story they made the movie The Recumbent out of, or what it was, the DiCaprio movie. It's a different story. No, Jedediah Smith was the first person to call Utah home. He lived here for a trapper guy and traveled all over the West, and we give him credit. He was a illiterate, Bible-carrying, religious guy. He came back from California, and they came across basically the Donner Trace back this way. Caught a glimpse of the Great Salt Lake and wrote in his journal that he had the overwhelming feeling that he had come inside of his home when he saw the Great Salt Lake. But anyway, years later, he's on the Santa Fe Trail, and according to the people who were with him, he just went down to this little seep to get a drink of water, and the Comanches fell on him and whacked him to pieces.
Oh,
it was their water hole. Yeah. They were nice people.
That's pretty brutal. I want to be respectful of your time, so maybe like one more story. Do you have any good stories about Mike or about LDS leaders that could be preserved electronically that future generations might hear about?
That's I've become surprised about. Leonard Arrington left his memoirs, his journal has been published now. I'm looking at a copy of it. And I read it carefully because I worked for him and I wanted to see what he said about me, which were mostly kind things. But I was surprised to discover that while he was there as church historian, the only professional historian ever to be called to that position, non-general authority to be called to that position, that he got great support from, guess who? Bruce R. McConkie. I was stunned to read that, but whenever he would come to the brethren with something and any sort of push and shove, Elder McConkie was on his side. He wanted Leonard to have as much authority and as much power as he could possibly have to write and have written the best history of the church that could be done. And I was really surprised to discover that because, McConkie's reputation is this sort of rock-ribbed fossil who fought against intellectuals and all of that. But apparently, according to Arrington, he was very supportive of what was going on in the history of the division in those days. And that surprised me. I just learned that recently by reading this. Maybe one other little insight that's kind of come to me recently, talking to the Joseph Smith Papers people, that if you're Gerald and Sandra Tanner or you're Mark Cord or several of these other anti-Mormons over the years who've tried to use history to destroy Mormonism, you get deeply into the Joseph Smith Papers, and they've all said it's pretty hard to deny he was who he said he was. You get that again and again from these guys, and they're people I respect. They're not state president types. They're scholars who've dug deep, and that's the conclusion they come to, that he was who he said he was, and quite faith promoting, I think.
These are the scholars that are working on the Joseph Smith papers?
Yeah, the scholars working on the papers, yeah.
And they're LDS, but they're not like top leaders?
What's that?
They're LDS, but they're not like in leadership. Is that?
No, they're PhDs that have been hired by the Papers Project. They're being well paid, by the way. When I went to work for the church, we were told weekly that we were in church service and didn't expect to be paid very well. They're paid quite well. In fact, the salaries are very competitive and probably better than could be offered in academia. Good scholars from really good schools.
Is there a requirement that they have to be LDS to work on the project?
Oh yeah, because it's official church. The initial work was funded by Larry Miller, and I have insight into that because I was working for him too on the side, taking tours as history teachers.
Mm-hmm.
But he funded it at the beginning, but then I don't know who, the church has put a lot of money into it too. But yeah, you've got to be a temple recommend eligible to work on the project. Yeah.
And you mentioned that Arrington was the last historian to be.
The only one. He's the only church historian who's not a general authority.
Do you have any thoughts on, because a lot of the historians now, they're not PhD historians, like the church historians, they're like lawyers. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've had a chance to chat with the guy, this is Kyle McKay, who's the historian now, and he's a nice guy, and I respect him as a general authority, but he's a lawyer, he's not a scholar. And of course, Marlon Jensen's a lawyer, but became an excellent historian, I think, while he had that job. Elder Snow, who had it before Elder McKay, I never got to know him, but I understand he did a pretty good job of coming into the fold of being historian. I don't have that sense about Elder McKay right now. But I do think it was wise of the brethren at the time, Elder Hunter, who were the other two or three who were supportive of Dr. Arrington. I think it was smart, and I wish they'd have stayed with it and continued to hire faithful professional historians to have that job, but they didn't do that. So not my call. I wish they had.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the training is different. Like lawyers are more client, where historians training's just like find the history, show the evidence, kind of regardless, right? Like
let the chips fall where they fall.
Yeah.
That's how President Hinckley was. I heard him say that out of his very mouth, sitting in the same room with him, about Mountain Meadows.
And he was referring, so he was referring to the telling of Mountain Meadows of just like, hey,
just let the chips fall where they fall. Yeah.
With Marlon Jensen, you mentioned him in his time as church historian being left-leaning. I feel like I can't remember if you said this in Utah Studies class or if you told me this at a dinner or somewhere, but I feel like there was a story where he said something along the lines of he cared more about his kids dating like a liberal than he cared more about.
What he said was, he had me take his family for a 10-day excursion to historical sites in the East, and it was a great experience. We rode a bus all over the place. And on that bus trip, he got up on the mic and said, I can't think of anything worse than to find out that one of my children had become a Republican. So he's very dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, going way back. His family.
Did he crack like a little smile like with that, or was he dead serious?
He didn't crack a smile. He was
friends with like
dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, I'll tell you. And like I say, it was reinforced when we had this book club meeting, and he went off on Israel as apartheid state and occupying land that's not theirs, and it was the real left-wing line. So he's dyed in the wool.
How did you feel being on that bus? I mean, you said you're not you don't identify strong with like Trump or Republicanism.
No, I'm not. I'm between my mother and my dad. And
What was that?
on both sides. I'm between my mother and my dad, who were on the opposite ends of the political spectrum. No, I mean, I can listen to anybody talk about politics and appreciate it if it's smart. What I don't appreciate is when it just becomes ideological and stupid and doesn't have any basis in fact, like Israel's an apartheid state. I mean, you can't argue that with a straight face. You know what apartheid means? I studied Africa for 40 years, and I know what apartheid is, and it's not an apartheid state.
I don't know if I completely understand. Apartheid is supposed to be like you have two classes of people within this.
It's a Dutch term that means there are two separate and apart groups of people, and they can't live together. They can't, and one group is in charge of the other group. And in South Africa, of course, it meant that the non-whites were actually put on reservations of sort, homelands. And that was apartheid. That's not true in Israel. Not even close. There's no way to make a case for apartheid that Israel's an apartheid state. It's just nonsense. But you hear that all the time, and people with straight faces who are anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian.
People saying that might be about the West Bank or.
Well, yeah, I'm troubled, Kason, by a lot of what I see them doing. Some of the settlement stuff, and I'm not a Bibi Netanyahu fan.
Right.
He's correct, and never have liked him very much. But it's not my. I'm not an Israeli.
Yeah.
Do what they want with him. It's not my problem.
That makes sense. Well, yeah, I appreciate the time that you spent talking with me today.
Well, I'm sorry about the tech problem, Ken. I'm done, and I don't know. I went all the way through the scandemic using my iPad. It was fine. Zoom this, Zoom that, Zoom meetings, Zoom, Zoomity, Zoom, and had no trouble. So I don't know what's going on here. I think what's happened is because I've been gone long enough, they tell you that when you become an emeritus faculty member, nothing changes, that you remain a faculty member, but they've obviously erased me out of the system.
Well, it might just be they added that authentication method for email, but they did something.
Yeah, he told me, he said, what's your non-Weber email address? I said, I don't have one. He said, what? I said, that's the only email I've ever had. He said, well, I don't know what to tell you then. He said, well, we can try, and he started talking about all this other stuff. And I said, let me just go back to my friend, and we'll manage it somehow.
Yeah.
So it would have taken us a half an hour. Anyway, I apologize for that.
No, it's all good. I'll see.
Good fun to see you, bro.
I had it recording here, and I tried to connect the phone call with the Google Meet, so it might have worked. But I'll look at the recording, and hopefully we've got some good stuff to work with. But yeah, I appreciate you getting on and talking with me. It's always good to catch up and talk with you. I'm
really proud of you, my friend.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
Keep me posted one way or another about everything, will you?
Okay, sounds good. I will.
All right. Take care, buddy. We'll see you.
Yeah, goodbye.